Welcome to a Monday edition of Beyond the Arc. I'm John Gonzalez alongside our NBA insider, Bill Ryder. And Bill, I think at the top here, we should probably wish Greg Popovich a speedy recovery. He suffered an undisclosed health issue over the weekend, missed the Saturday game. He's out indefinitely. So hopefully it's not anything major.
Yeah, I don't have any information on it. Saw it this morning. I think Shams was, as always, the first one out with it. What Popovich, I was surprised. My guess was he was 68, 75. So, as you said, he's 75-year-old. Hopefully, it's minor. We don't have details. It's obviously worrisome, and we send our good thoughts his direction and toward the Spurs, of course.
He's a national treasure. He's an NBA treasure. He's one of my favorite people I've ever interviewed and talked to. I know that he for a very long time was like a little bit of a pain to sideline reporters in game. And that became kind of his shtick. But if you talk to him about, like, if you really get him going and talk to him, if you're inquisitive about basketball, or we've seen him engage in politics and societal issues, he has an unbelievable worldview.
But can I tell you the first time I met him? You tell me, or maybe producer Eric can. I have a quick story about Popovich. Can I say the F word as part of the story, or do you want me to truncate it?
I think maybe, just truncate it.
Okay, because you dropped one last week, so I feel liberated.
I didn't. You keep saying that. I put it back.
Yeah, I heard it.
Coming out and it
you swallowed it?
Go ahead. Yeah.
So back in my sort of like 10 years ago, I was flying around the country to introduce myself to all the coaches and GMs who I didn't know. And so I went to San Antonio, hung out with the folks at the staff and the PR guy and the GM, and I want a one-on-one with Pop, just like in his office, to get to know him. They're like, no problem. So I got into my best suit coat, right? You know how that goes, sports writer outfit, where it's the shirt, the sports coat, and the nice jeans and the cool shoes, and I got my haircut and everything. And I go to like the scrum, but the PR guy's like, don't say anything. Don't say anything. Don't talk. Just if he's in a mood or whatever, if he's in a mood, just don't say anything. Okay. So me and 10 reporters are standing around. Popovich comes out and goes, what the bleep? All right. What are your questions? Really bad mood. All the reporters are super intimidated. No one will make eye contact. I'm looking around like everyone's scared. So I'm just standing there, and he turns to me and he goes, what are you, the effing eye candy? Because I was like dressed nice as everybody else. And before I could think, I go, my wife thinks I'm sexy. And he goes, F this, and just walks away from the entire scrum. And I turn to the PR guy. I go, am I still hanging out with Pop? He's like, oh, no, you're not doing that. That was my introduction to Greg Popovich.
Sometimes
I dress too nicely.
Well, you do dress very nicely. Sometimes he can be a little moody, but if you catch him in the right mood, he's awesome. So we wish him a full and speedy recovery.
He's a very funny, intense guy. Like in basketball, you catch the intense side, but if you can get him away from where he's in job mode, he's amazing.
Yeah. So get well soon, Pop. All right. Later in the show, we're going to talk about KD being mad at Stephen A, and we'll talk some basketball as well. The Bucks are in trouble, and Golden State is surviving, Bill, without Steph, although Steph could be back tonight. Potentially he's questionable, but there are reports that he's participating in shoot around. So it looks like he's on track to return, but the schedule's about to get tough. So we'll get into whether or not we should believe in the Warriors. But first, the shove heard round the world. Embiid versus a Philly columnist who I know very well named Marcus Hayes. For everybody who missed this somehow, I don't know how you could, but Embiid has been out for a while. There's a columnist in Philadelphia named Marcus Hayes who works for the Philadelphia Inquirer. And I'll get into Marcus and sort of like his MO in a little bit. But he wrote a piece about Joel Embiid not being available so far this season. And I'm going to read some of it to you in a second. But the general gist was he mentioned Joel Embiid and his son and Joel Embiid's brother who died during a car accident tragically during Embiid's first year in the NBA. And basically saying that Joel wanted to leave a legacy for his son, who's named after his brother, Arthur, who passed away. But Joel Embiid can't do that if he's not playing. Well, not surprisingly, Joel Embiid was not happy about this. He talked about it on Friday and said he's done way too much bleep for the city of Philadelphia to be treated that way. And then on Saturday, Marcus Hayes showed up to the Sixers game. Now, that's an old school media move, columnist move. Yep. You know it.
Got to show up.
You got to show up so they can yell at you. Well, it escalated beyond that, where Joel Embiid was like, keep my son and my dead brother's name out of your mouth. And if you don't, the next time you say something, I'm going to do something and I don't have to live with the consequences. And then evidently Joel Embiid shoved Marcus. Now, I understand Embiid's frustration. Embiid is a good guy. He wears his heart on his sleeve. He was upset, clearly. Marcus was so out of line with the lead of the column that he ended up actually changing it, which is highly unlikely or
Can you
highly
explain lead for
unusual.
people? Yeah. So the lead being the very top of the story was the brother and his dead brother and son stuff. And I think it's worth noting, as I understand it, I haven't seen this, but I'm told by people in Philly, they put a picture of Joel Embiid's son initially that went with the story.
Yes, and we can get into all of like the media machinations of this.
But just Marcus, to understand that Embiid's not overreacting. This was directed at him, involving his family. Very pointed.
It was beyond the pale, for sure. To the point where Marcus got so much blowback that he changed the lead, the beginning of the story, and they changed the picture. So he goes and he shows up to get yelled at by Joel, and then it escalates and Joel shoves him. And now the league is once again investigating Joel Embiid and the Philadelphia 76ers. Top line takeaway for you on this. None of this is good. This is about the worst
a couple things
that it could possibly be for Joel and the Sixers.
So I've asked some people in the Sixers organization, I've asked some people in the league office what they think the outcome will be. Not people that are part of the disciplinary sort of group within the NBA league office, but people I know with the Sixers and people in New York. And for the first time, the answer on something like this, no idea. So that's first of all. I think this is so unprecedented. And I think there's an acknowledgement that it's not saying it's acceptable, but this isn't Embiid or a player pushing someone because someone said, the Clippers suck and they have a new arena and they're never going to win a game like I did 2 weeks ago or whatever. So I think everyone's waiting with bated breath, including in Philly. Is it 2 games? Is it 20? I don't think anybody knows. Is it in between? Nobody knows what the suspension is. John, I don't want this to come off the wrong way. I don't think it's okay. You can't shove players, or players can't shove reporters or anybody. I understand. It's a mistake by Embiid. I would make that mistake. I have a son. I have never lost someone, a brother, sibling, child, thank God, knock on wood, early in life, but it is the thing you dream. It's the nightmare. And so he's going to take the suspension. And he said this to the guy. He's like, if you ever do this again, I'll accept the consequences. And I think he's going to accept the consequences of pushing this guy. It's not okay, but I totally understand why. And I think it's one of the rare exceptions for me as a reporter who's been in locker rooms and who's been screamed at, where I understand why Embiid did what he did. And while I can't pretend that it's quote unquote okay, I'm team Embiid on this one. And I'm usually not in these situations.
I don't blame him. I'm going to read Marcus's column here, the top of the part that ended up getting under Embiid's skin and led to all this. So here's what he originally wrote before he changed it. Joel Embiid consistently points to the birth of his son, Arthur, as the major inflection point in his basketball career. He often says he wants to be great, to leave a legacy for the boy named after his little brother, who tragically died in an automobile accident when Embiid was in his first year as a 76er. Well, in order to be great at your job, you first have to show up to work. Embiid has been great at just the opposite. Now in his 11th season, he consistently has been in poor condition. This poor conditioning apparently seems to have delayed his debut this season. Couple of things here. Number one.
How does that get through an editor, by the way? How does that get through an editor and run?
So about that, I worked at the paper, at the Philadelphia Inquirer, and I think that newspaper editors, especially sports desk newspaper editors, tend to be functionaries. They might change a comma or a word here and there, but mostly they just ingest your copy and they go home. I've worked at magazines.
That wasn't true. That wasn't true when I worked in newspaper. It was a long time ago.
Okay.
Maybe they've been gutted so much by the finances.
I'm comparing it to magazine editing, which tends to be back and forth. There's a lot of passes. You're really working on the copy. You're trying to get it as good as it can be. Newspaper editing.
Oh, I don't know. I'll respectfully push back on that. At least the newspapers I worked at, Des Moines Register, Chicago Tribune, Kansas City Star. Now, this is a long time ago.
Better places.
I'm shocked to hear that because I hated being edited. And in retrospect, it was a really good thing.
Very rarely was there any kind of actual,
Inquirer,
especially at the Inquirer. Yes, it was.
Well, it was actually, it was
stark. Wow. I mean, like compared to places that I've worked, like, different magazines, Sports Illustrated, The Ringer has a magazine ethos. There was a lot of back and forth, but some of that, in fairness, had to do with time, right? You're working on longer pieces, and they take longer to turn around. This is a daily column thing, and they basically just throw them up. The other thing here is Marcus Hayes I've known Marcus for several decades now, and Marcus has a reputation for doing things like this. Marcus as a person, I never had a problem with. Marcus as a columnist, is kind of like a troll columnist. He purposely writes incendiary things, and to his credit, that style has made him probably the most read columnist in Philadelphia. People love to hate read him. He writes stuff that gets people's backs up. He gets attention for it. But this time he went too far.
I mean, look, you and I have a different view, I think, of what's like incendiary. I don't mind people who have opinions, and some of them are full of crap, and some of them actually, whatever. This to me is just such a, it's so like, if this is the line, right, and the guy is right up on it normally, he is so far away from that line that it's not even in the realm of incendiary. I mean, this, like, you can't involve, I mean, look, I can be an incendiary columnist, people say, and I was pretty hard on LeBron when I covered him. And I remember when LeBron's mom, this is a long time ago, all the reporters on the Heat beat that I was with, I thought they were a bunch of cowards. If I'm being honest, most of them were. Like, I really did. Like, they were like, I thought Riley rolled over him and Tim Donovan, who does media there, and they wouldn't criticize the guy. And I remember when LeBron's mom, if you remember, this got caught on camera getting into it with some valet, and I refused to write about it because I get families off limits. And all those other reporters wrote about it then because that was how they wanted to sort of get at LeBron. They didn't want to. I don't understand the thinking, whether you're incendiary or otherwise. Because I've seen beat writers sort of get into family stuff too, because the news gives them the cover. That's not true here. I just don't understand the thinking of why you would even bring it up. If you want to go to Embiid for not playing or not playing back-to-backs or being fragile, that's totally fine. Like, just totally there's enough fodder there. Just go at him for I don't.
And you are absolutely right that this was not just a failure by Marcus, who has to own all of it, but a failure of structure at the Inquirer for the editors to let that get through. And the Inquirer issued a statement afterwards and like really had Marcus's back, not surprising, but basically said that, it was unacceptable for Joel to make physical contact with Marcus. It is. They're right about that. But what about your editors? How do you let something like that run in the first place? To not take any ownership of that and say, hey, we actually thought about this. Like, we helped cause this situation by letting this thing run in the first place.
I've read that so many times to try, because look, you're right. When you write on deadline, you sometimes write clunky things. And I have written clunky things where people have come to me and been like, look, dude, it's one thing when you do A, B, and C, but D, like most of the stuff I write, it's reporters, it's colleagues who get mad at me. It's very rarely people in the NBA. Like, normally people are like, yeah, it's true, but it pisses me off, but it's what people are saying or thinking. But I've written clunky stuff like you have, and
sure,
I read that thing multiple times. It's not that. Like, it's not it's not a clunky sort of. It's just mean spirited, or
it's mean spirited. Marcus knows exactly what he's doing with something like this. He knows he's going to get a reaction. And he got one. I just don't think he bargained for the reaction that he got. We're going to take a quick break. There's more to discuss here. We're going to, I want to ask you about, potentially the suspension that Joel Embiid is facing, the ripple effects for the Sixers, who are 1-4. They're supposed to get PG back tonight, but this is a horrendous start for them. It's for an organization that consistently face plants, this is yet another misstep for them. And could not be off to a worse start for the Sixers, but we'll discuss that and we'll continue this conversation on the other side. This is Beyond the Arc.
A new crown awaits. Brilliantly taken. The journey to become European football royalty has begun.
A stunning goal.
The UEFA Europa League on CBS Sports Network and stream every match live on Paramount Plus.
Welcome back to Beyond the Arc. We're live on YouTube, but if you're not joining us on YouTube, a reminder that you can also find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Please download, subscribe, and leave a review. And if you're listening on Spotify, you can leave us a comment on this episode. Just look below the play button on the Spotify app in full screen mode, and you can tell us what you think about the show or leave us a question. Bill, have you ever, like you said, you were a columnist, you wrote stuff that ticked people off. I definitely did. I was going to ask you about incidents that might have happened in your career. I had one with Carl Everett back in the day when I was a columnist in Dallas. Carl Everett, for people who don't remember, was a Major League Baseball outfielder and was kind of like Kyrie before Kyrie in that, like,
he had a lot of issues with people.
He had crazy, something about the dinosaurs. I forget if he thought that the dinosaurs never existed or he might have been a flat earther, but I wrote something in spring training and he came right at me and had to be held back by his teammates. And it like I was a kid then.
At spring training.
At spring
They're
training.
usually so chill at spring training.
I thought so too. And
Yeah.
so he had to be separated, held back. So camp breaks. Everybody goes back to Dallas. I do what you're supposed to do. I show up on the first day the clubhouse is open, and I'm like, he's going to yell at me. Here we go. And I stand in front of his locker, and he takes one look at me and he goes, "We need to clean up he was the team barber. He goes, "We need to clean up your hair. You're getting shaggy. You want me to cut it?" And I was like, "I guess we're good now." So
you got the show up code is a real thing.
Yeah.
The worst altercation I ever had was with someone that I'd done nothing but praise in writing. It was Chris Paul at the Clippers facility here it was actually we did a couple TV interviews. He canceled the first couple. It was him. It was me interviewing him, Blake Griffin, DeAndre Jordan together. And it just went, I don't even know what I did to him. Like in the interview, he told me what an idiot I was the whole time. I would be like, "Hey, are you guys gonna be good this year?" And he would turn to Blake and go, Chris Paul would go, "What a moron, what an effing idiot." And then he would turn, smile, and be like, "I really think we can win game." The whole interview. I would ask DeAndre Jordan like a question about his defense, and Chris would and then after the interview, he started screaming for 20 minutes and told me it was the craziest thing I've ever experienced, and I still to this day don't know why. I just know that I don't like that guy.
Yeah, I mean, and these things happen, right? These things happen. But this was obviously something separate and apart from the usual course of business. And so now the league, as I mentioned, is launching an investigation. I think there's going to be a suspension. Which
I think there's too. Can I reporting, not report, but like I've asked that. People I've talked to don't know. The general vibe I get is it's a suspension of some kind. I would be personally shocked if he's just fined. But I've heard a couple of people say to me, nothing will surprise me. So I think they've got to suspend him for a couple.
I think so too, because it sets a precedent. If not, right, like you can't put your hands on a reporter, even though as you mentioned and I mentioned, I certainly understand why he did it, but it sets a precedent. So I suspect that he will be suspended, which will further delay Joel Embiid's already delayed beginning to the season. And I'm bringing this up because yes, they are supposed to reportedly get PG back tonight, but they're 1-4. Bill. This is a disastrous start. They've looked really bad. I don't know who's worse off right now, them or the Bucks. The Bucks, they have the Bucks. The Sixers.
The Bucks are worse off. I mean, the thing about I was thinking the exact same thing. I know they need Middleton. I mean, the Bucks have their two best players. And by the way, Giannis is playing pretty well. I mean,
him and Dame went for 75 the other night, and they still lost.
Monster game, yeah. And Giannis had some monster games even the other night when Dame was whatever it was. He was like 1-12 or 1-7 from the 3-point line, whatever it was. I think the Bucks are in worse shape because there's a world where if you believe that the Bucks can suddenly be a good basketball team, then there's a world where in a long NBA season they'll rattle off wins. I think what we're seeing is they're a bad team. I still think Philly can be a really good team when Paul George, who's back for their next game today, and whenever the hell Embiid plays, when they're together, I think they can. I know that you are what is it? Once bitten, twice shy, or whatever. And you've been bitten like 38 times in this analogy by your Sixers. I still think it's a good basketball team once they're healthy, and they can be okay.
I think they're both in a lot of trouble. The one thing that I don't look at either situation and go, oh, one of those could climb out of it. Yes, getting PG back will certainly help. Who knows about Embiid? Because on top of Embiid and now this like looming potential suspension over the incident with Marcus Hayes in the locker room, who knows what's going on with his knee, right? I mean, he's missed somewhere close to 50% of the games that he's been eligible to play in the NBA in his 11-year career. That's not great. Even if he comes back, how healthy is he? How much will they have time? But then you look at the Bucks and you go, they do have their two best guys, and it just doesn't work. It hasn't worked.
No, they're not very good.
75 points the other night combined, and they still ended up losing. And you go, all right, well,
they should have won that game though. That was a brutal. Donovan Mitchell hit that shot, and you're just like, what? What are you going to do? What can you do? Yeah.
They're going to get Chris Middleton back, but that doesn't really solve their perimeter defense problems. They've got Gary Trent Jr., who's their like lone guy on the perimeter who you think, okay, he could be useful. He's getting torched. The whole team is getting torched on the perimeter. Well.
Yeah.
The only thing that gives me even like slight hope for either the Bucks or the Sixers is there's only 4 teams, Bill, in the Eastern Conference that are over 500. Everybody else is 500.
It's been look, I also think that Philly has a really good coach. And I do not think personally that Milwaukee has a really good coach. So I think
this hasn't come up before. Tell us about Doc Rivers.
You think the same thing. You think the exact look. Orlando's injury issues really helpful. I mean, I think the Knicks are going to eventually rattle off. I think they're going to eventually rattle off 12 out of 13 games. I mean, I think the Knicks are going to be just fine, and Boston's obviously fine, but Orlando's not as good as we thought they were. And sort of after Boston, New York, and if you think Cleveland's legit, there is a big drop off, and you're right. That does give the Sixers and that does give the Bucks some room to maneuver. And it's a long season. I don't think Milwaukee's good. I don't think they're a good basketball team, and I don't think they think they're a good basketball team based on how they've been quitting and giving up. I think they're in a more dire shape than your Philly team, because I at least can close my eyes and pretend when Embiid comes back for some games, Philly starts winning games.
Right. In theory, you'd think, okay, still on paper, this experiment makes sense, but I just have so many questions about Embiid. And by the way, what Marcus said in his column about the poor conditioning has delayed the debut of this season. By all accounts, by everybody that I've talked to over there who still covers that team, it's not a conditioning thing. He came back, lost a bunch of weight, looks good.
Right.
It's
not conditioning.
Yeah, and he even talked about it on Friday where he said it's a mental issue, making sure that I feel okay playing on my knee.
He's Mr. Glass from Unbreakable. I mean, that's the problem, is that it doesn't sort of matter what he does or doesn't do. Best of intentions, he breaks. I mean, Embiid is, and he's older too. I mean, this was true, as you noted, his entire career. He fell in the draft when he came out of Kansas to Philly because of his injury issues. He didn't play a lot. I mean, he's been injured in his 20s. Of course, he's going to be injured in his 30s.
With the Bucks, I know that you talked about this with Brad on Friday, but I wasn't on that show, so I want to do a little bit with you. And I know you had reporting for CBSSports.com. Everybody should check out that piece. The rumbles for Giannis are going to pick up in earnest if they don't turn this thing around, aren't they?
Yeah, you know how this goes, right? Like when you're reporting stuff, if it makes enough waves, people call you, and they either tell you you're an idiot or they tell you got it right. And so, when did that story run? Thursday? It was a crazy week last
Friday.
week.
We teased it on Thursday, and then you talked about it on Friday.
That day and the next day, my phone just kept ringing from people that I couldn't get on the phone, who were like, "It's true." And a couple guys were like, "We're gonna," they're hopeful. They've got to be bad enough that Giannis asks for a trade, but there are a lot more people after the last few losses who think trade deadline, it's possible. I talked to a GM the other day who told me, he's like, "Don't quote me, don't say my name, but you can put me on the list of people. I'm ready." Like they want the Bucks losing is very good for a lot of people out there who are at least going to make a run. And there are some teams who think they have the assets and or the market to get them. So yeah, I think Giannis, I think that the report's right, and the feeling is that Giannis is going to be available if Milwaukee plays badly enough, whether it's this summer
and it's
or
not
trade deadline.
It's not surprising, right? Because yes, Giannis has signed these extensions with Milwaukee, but he has had multiple opportunities to say, he was asked, by various media outlets, "Hey, do you want to be a Dirk Nowitzki and just finish your career with Milwaukee?" And he said, I think it might have been New York Magazine or
it was Miriam.
Yeah, but the general takeaway was winning is more important to me. I would rather win another championship than just play out my career in one place. He didn't expressly say I want out. Yeah, he's planting the seed. I mean, Bill, look, he's still in his prime. He's a first-team All-NBA player. First-team All-NBA players who have won championships and been MVP in the NBA, when the team detonates, they don't tend to stick around. They get up and go somewhere else.
No, they don't. And a GM said something to me, or a source last week said something that I thought was interesting. I never thought of. He's like, "Bill, we non-players have midlife crises when we're 40. Players have them when they're 30. If you if you look, guys that turn 30 start to think my career is going to be shorter than I expected. It's going really." I mean, Giannis turns 30 in December, and if you're Giannis and you're about to turn 30 and you start to evaluate things and you're playing for an organization that can't win and you look pretty handcuffed in terms of where you are, and maybe you're starting to have a little bit of skepticism about Doc Rivers and what's going on there. Yeah, to your point, the idea that you're going to do what every team does or every star does when the world falls apart around you, you go where you think the world's not falling apart. I mean, Kevin Durant forced his way to a team. Like, Giannis was drafted by those guys. It's not like there are stars like Kevin Durant who have forced their way to teams, constructed the team in their image, and then just kidding, I don't want to be here.
It's not looking great. I can't wait to see how Doc spins this if things don't go well in Milwaukee, because he's never underperformed. But if all of a sudden Giannis asks out on his watch, good luck explaining that one away, Doc. I'm glad you brought up KD, by the way, because he's also making news. He has a little bit of an issue with one Stephen A. Smith. We're going to take a quick break, and then we'll discuss that on the other side. This is Beyond the Arc.
Today, with the support of the NFL, a new playbook is being written. The National Gay Flag Football League provides inclusive play for over 4,000 LGBTQ plus players and allies. Here is a home with no penalty for being you.
All right, welcome back to Beyond the Arc. A reminder that we are live on YouTube Monday through Friday, noon Eastern. You can find our page at Beyond the Arc CBS. Please come and join us. Hit the like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. As I mentioned, Kevin Durant, he's got a lot of issues with one Stephen A. Smith. I missed this. You brought it to my attention. But apparently Stephen A. Said something the other day, and I'm going to read it. He said, "I don't question the greatness nor commitment of Kevin Durant. When you are that great, you should be able to be a better leader than he's shown." Kind of tepid as Stephen A. goes.
It is tepid.
You know, like Stephen A. has said way more incendiary stuff than this. But KD, sometimes it can be a little thin-skinned, and sometimes just like certain things get under his skin. Maybe that's this, but he was asked about it, and he told The Athletic, "I don't understand how people even listen to Stephen A. I've been in the league for 18 years. I've never seen Stephen A. at a practice or film session or shoot around. I've never seen him anywhere but on TV talking bleep about players. He's a clown to me. He's always been a clown. You can write that too."
Okay, first of all, if it's possible to go to film sessions with the players, I've been screwing stuff up, and I'm in. Mm-hmm. I go to the other. Yeah. All right. Can I actually? Kevin Durant's going to make me defend Stephen A. I'm going to defend Stephen A. Smith. So first of all, I've seen Stephen A. Smith at a lot more basketball games than any other star at his level. He goes to game. They're the finals, right? Or they're really big. But I've been at games in Golden State and various places where I go to like grab a coffee at halftime, and Stephen A's in there. So he's sort of. But B, look, I'm not Stephen A. Smith. You're not Stephen A. Smith. We get it. And I love working at CBS Sports, but CBS Sports has had me in a studio until this year for the last 5 years. So do you know what happens? I've tried it. I've tried the multiplicity Michael Keaton thing. It turns out if you're in a studio at night during NBA games, talking NBA games, Kevin, you can't actually go, or even just a studio for your job, you actually can't be at the game at the same time, right? So it's just Stephen A. is a television personality. He's not going to be at games. That's how.
And I will say before Stephen A. was a television personality, when both of us were columnists at the Philadelphia Inquirer at the same time, Stephen A. was at games all the time.
I'm sure.
All the time. I was there all the time. Stephen A. was there all the time. I mean, like that guy showed up, and then he became an outsized TV personality making $25 million a year. And like you said, you can't be in two places at once. They want him in the studio. He's in the studio.
He also has a reputation. Like people talk to him. Like, you know, sometimes when you're reporting with people, I'll be talking to a whatever NBA person. They'll mention, I just talked to Shams. I just talked to Woj. People say to me, they talk to Steve. Stephen A. is famous on TV and has a reporter's background and uses it. I hate bringing these guys up, but I don't think Skip ever talked to anybody once he got rich and famous, right? Stephen A.'s former sparring partner. Stephen A. is actually talking to people. So like the whole, not that it should matter, criticism's part of the deal, Kevin Durant, but I guess Kevin's point is, this is just a talking head who doesn't do the work. That's actually, I think, it's not true. Stephen A. Smith,
I don't think it's
has access to
entirely true either. To the extent that there's any actual substance here, what do you make of the original point by Stephen A. that he wants Kevin Durant to be a greater? Because this kind of stuff, like talking about like, hey, I need you to be a leader when you're not around the team. Like if you're not really
that's the problem. Okay,
in the team business all the time, how could you?
So I criticize the hell out of LeBron's leadership his first 2 years in Miami. Really his first year in Miami. But I covered that team. I had sources on that team. I just don't do that stuff from a distance. If you're not with the team day to day. Now, like, is there, like, I have written that one time, I think, since I stopped being a beat guy, and that was Trae Young. And I had a lot of people telling me that he's not a leader and guys don't like him and they didn't want to be around him a couple years ago. And it's true. So maybe people are telling that to Stephen A. I can't speak to it because I don't really buy it. It seems like better leadership. Yes, it's a legitimate criticism because it's hard for me to believe that Stephen A. Smith is so connected that he's talking to multiple people in the Suns organization to get a sense day in, day out of what's going on, but I don't know. Maybe he's got those sources.
I could see how that would irritate KD, especially because while we're on the subject of KD and the Suns and whether or not he's a leader, they had a lot of issues last year, up to including but not limited to their fourth quarter offense that like basically detonated their entire season. Bill, they're 5-1.
Yeah. Yeah. It looks. I mean, it's like early sample stuff. I was gonna actually there's too much going on, but we could almost do overreactions again because there's I don't. Do you buy it? I don't buy it. But the record is the record. Like the Clippers have finally come back. Last week the Clippers now the Clippers. I don't know what they are. They're 3-3. I mean, teams are going to regress to the mean, but they look really good. And if Kevin Durant's healthy, who cares about his leadership? Maybe he's just such a good basketball player. If he plays 70 games, it'll all be fine.
I mean, they're 5-1 in a loaded Western Conference, and they've got the Sixers tonight. And despite the fact that PG is making his debut with his new team, looks like they're going to cruise to. I'd be shocked if they don't win that game. The Sixers have looked horrendous. I mean, they look good. And bringing in Tyus Jones, like that kind of solved the problem that they had, where it was like, okay, who's the point guard on this team, and like also it adds depth.
Yep.
So far, so good. But
coaching change, right? I mean, like coaching change with what Bud's about, and they have an actual point guard. And given Beal and Booker and Kevin Durant, like the runway to try and play more games together, maybe they're not a top 3 team, but if they're the 5 or 6 seed in the West, great. Like good job. Like that, I think that's a harder accomplishment, a more impressive accomplishment this year than it was last year for the reasons that we've talked about. And whatever Kevin Durant is or isn't as a leader, I don't know. I don't have the reporting on that. The guy's an amazing basketball player, and so is Devin Booker. So even if those guys play together, for a bunch of games this year, and Beal's pretty good and able to supplement, and Jones is like just running the offense, and they're a little bit better coached. Yeah, they could be surprising.
They could be a tough out. All right, so we're like a little split on the Suns and whether or not they're real. I got to bring up another team here that we're not sure what to make of them, especially because producer Aaron is chomping at the bit for us to discuss his Golden State Warriors. Bill, they are 5-1. They beat the Rockets in Houston in overtime over the weekend. And I was looking at this and I'm like, am I actually buying this? Because, Steph went down with the ankle injury. He's a participant at shoot around today. He's questionable for tonight, but it looks like he's on track to be back, which is great news for them. But when he went down, Steve Kerr was like, I like our depth. I think it's going to, we couldn't probably sustain the team if Steph was out for an indefinite period, but a small amount of time. I like our chances. Well, he was right. And I looked at this and I'm like, is this right? They're 4th in offensive rating and 2nd in defensive rating.
Can I just remind us of the schedule? I've got it in front of me, right?
Please.
Okay. Listen to these juggernauts they've cut their way through. And listen to these behemoths of the NBA. Portland,
not
Utah,
good. Not good.
The Clippers. 2 games against the Pelicans team that Pelicans team is
injured,
injury riddled. They're not what we thought they're going to be.
Beyond injury.
And a disappointing so far Rockets team that they beat, I think, in overtime, right? So it's like
overtime.
I mean,
but without Steph.
That's a great point. It is without Steph. So Steph's going to be back, and then I think they have one more easy game, and then then they have some challenges. And so I think let's overreact Tuesday, tomorrow to the Warriors are a championship contender, but in 2 weeks, well, actually, I want it to be true, John. Like I love the Warriors. I like Steph.
Fun when the Warriors are good. Yeah. It's fun when Steph is good. You brought up the schedule. They've got the Wiz tonight. That's their easy game. They're on a road trip now. They're at the Wiz, and then it gets tough. Here, let me run this through with you.
Yeah.
At the Celtics after that.
Ooh.
At the Cavs after that. And then at the Thunder before they come home when they have the Mavs and the Grizz, and then they go back on the road and they're at the Clips, who Clips are 2-4, but they've been lucky at times. Those are all tough games absent the Wizards.
So even putting the Clippers aside, who I'm obviously really, big Clippers homer lately. That's 5 after tonight's game. That's 5 really daunting games. And you said 3 are on the road. I mean, we'll see.
3 in a row on the road. It's Celtics, Cavs, and Thunder. And by the way, when they come home for that Mavs game obviously is Clay's return. So that's going to have a lot of emotion. Yeah. Go
3-2, and by the way, go 3-2 in that 5-game stretch. And I'm in on what we just said about the Suns. Like maybe they're a 5 or 6 seed. Maybe because I thought they were a lower playing team. Start the Warriors
So
starting the year.
I thought so too. I had them out. And
Oh,
now
you had them out, yeah.
And now all of a sudden I'm looking at it because okay, the offensive rating thing without Steph is kind of bewildering to me that they were able to like score as many points as they've been able to score, without their best offensive guy. The thing that I kind of do believe in though is their defensive rating. Now, as you mentioned, they haven't exactly played juggernauts, but they have useful pieces that they can shuttle in and out and make things difficult on guys. And Draymond so far, even though he did get a tech the other night, Draymond so far has really been, as we've seen before, when he's on the court, he really is the engine that makes that team go, especially defensively.
And easy to forget last year when he played, they had a good enough record that they would not have been a playing team.
They were good.
And they are deeper than last year. And I mean, the resurrected man going to the Sixers. I mean, Buddy Hield has looked right. He was like a shadow of himself in Philly.
He had one game in the playoffs where he went absolutely supernova, and beyond that, they were like, "Yeah, you can go." Right. And then he shows up in Washington or in Golden State, and he's amazing. So I'm interested to see how this goes, especially over the stretch, because you're right. The schedule does get more difficult for them. Speaking of the schedule, before we wrap up today's show, there's no basketball tomorrow because the NBA wants to get everybody out to vote. So
please
today,
vote. Wherever you are, please vote.
Please, everybody get out and vote. And we're going to talk about all of the games tonight on tomorrow's show, and we'll do some overreactions. But everybody in the association, Bill, plays tonight. And the fun part about this is they're staggering the tip times so that a new game tips off every 15 minutes, beginning with at 7 p.m. Eastern, Bucks, the home and home continues, Bucks at Cavs tonight. And then you've got a new tip off every 15 minutes through the end of the night.
Oh, dude, it's amazing. So you guys are putting this in the string, and you're right. I never thought of this. Why not just do this? Why not just do this a couple nights
Fridays?
A week? Yeah, I think. Did you say Friday? Yeah, why not?
No, I think it was Aaron's idea, but it's a good idea.
I like it too. Yeah, and then we could also get a little more. I don't even know what you call. What do you call red zone for basketball? Because they do this. NBA.com does this. Yeah. It's fun when there's enough games.
On the app last year, they did it, and I think it was called Clutch Time or Crunch Time, one of those. But it was super fun, and they did the exact same thing. I think it was Crunch Time. Jared Greenberg hosts that, and it was
my guy, Jared Greenberg. That's my dude,
and he's awesome at it. And there's so much action going on, and it's like, for us, we're basketball junkies. We get paid to do this for a living, but we just love the game. It's like tapping into my veins, man. I'm loving this. So it would be great if they did that. And, they do it on MLK Day where the entire league plays, they start early. There's games all day long. It's like a basketball holiday, but, and I love the idea that they're trying to get everybody out to vote tomorrow. So that's also to the NBA's credit, but yes, let's do this periodically.
It's a cool, what's the bet? What game? So I'm most looking forward to the Cavs Bucks game because, as is always the case,
you want to see the Bucks go down.
I want to see the Bucks just keep. I'm enjoying the stories. Yeah.
Well, by the way, the flip side of that is the Cleveland Cavaliers are your Eastern Conference leaders right now at a perfect 7-0.
Are they? So maybe we'll do that this week a little bit. Are they this good? I think the answer might be Overreaction Tuesday tomorrow, but I think the reaction, I think it might be, they might be.
I think
really
it is. You're excited for that. Let's see what else we got on tap tonight. So PG comes back. That's one of the last games. Memphis and Brooklyn. No, Brooklyn. That's. I wish you had been on the show last week when Sam Quinn was on, because Sam and producer Aaron are like all over the Nets and are buying into Ben Simmons. Very interesting to me.
Don't buy into Ben Simmons.
Do it. It's a bad idea.
Oh, did you go? We're gonna go at Sam for something gently. What was it? You were gonna kind of.
You know what? It was. He wrote that that Russell Westbrook might have been getting back to basics, but it was more like, in fairness to Sam, it was a little bit more even-handed than I thought it was on first scan. So that was okay.
Okay. Got it.
What do we got here? Charlotte and Minnesota tonight. That could be interesting. No, Orlando and OKC. This is such a bummer that Banchero went down because I was really looking forward to that game. Some of these games are not great. Wemby at the Clips could be interesting, but I guess I'm not to be too typecast here, but I do want to see how PG looks, and the Suns, as you mentioned, like, are we buying it?
I think Steph and PG back are the biggest stories of the day. And I really want to. I'm sorry, Milwaukee. I really want to see the cat. I mean, a 1-6 Milwaukee Bucks team. Give me the drama. Give me the drama.
And you know what? Not to like pat ourselves on the back here, but you and I did the schedule thing last week, and we want 1-6 is on the table. This is like steamrolling. You know, like they're going downhill fast.
It's very possible.
And they're looking at it right now. They're staring in the face unless they figure out a way to beat a Cavs team that has been extremely good. So that's going to be fun tonight. All right, everybody, enjoy the basketball tonight. Bill and I are going to be back tomorrow to discuss all of these games. As I mentioned, everybody in action this evening. We're very excited about it. We'll do some overreactions. It's going to be a fun day. But for now, for our NBA insider, Bill Ryder, I'm John Gonzalez. Back at it tomorrow. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.